What is going on, y'all? It is Jimble Jamble back for another one. Today we're going over purple yellow Rosinante. The Lakers color combo. This leader is probably the weirdest leader from the new set, and unfortunately the worst. He is one of my favorite characters in the anime whole franchise thing. But it's all about protecting your law characters, which can be really good against an opponent depending on the matchup. So we're just gonna go straight into that deck list, but before we do that, hit that like button, hit that sub button, you know what to do, and we're gonna get right into it. Alrighty, y'all, so Rosinante, purple yellow leader, 5k power, 4 life, pretty standard stuff. Once per turn, if a Trafalgar Law would be KO'd, you can take the top card of your life pile to your hand instead. It does not say your turn or opponent's turn, so it's any turn. If they try to KO it, you can just take a life instead. And with yellow's healing capabilities, it's very strong in the moment sometimes. And then the other ability reads, activate main once per turn, shuffle a Dawn. For the turn, the next time you play a law card from your hand with a cost of 4 or more, the cost will be reduced by 2. I am a sucker for cheating Dawn out. Being able to play things for cheaper or just getting Dawn back for playing things or attacking, etc. But this leader is really interesting. Obviously you can tell just from the list it's a lot of law cards, to say the least. So we're just going to get right into it. So starting off with the OP09 Searcher Law, look at the top 4 cards of your deck and reveal a cost 2 or higher Straw Hat card or Heart Pirates card. This is majority of the deck, really. There is a couple Straw Hat cards. There's mostly Heart Pirates. It's really just to add more of your laws because it can search itself, which is, you kind of got to play this Searcher. So, real strong Searcher, turn 1. And then we got the 3-cost Law from 05. When attacking, if your opponent has more Dawn cards on their field than you, look at the top 5 of your deck, reveal a Heart Pirates card, and add it to your hand. This is really good considering you're Dawn minusing for your leader effect to play things for cheaper. This cannot be played for 1 cost. That would be a little pretty dumb. Like a 2 Dawn turn, play this out would be very, very funny, but it's not that good. But this comes up, you're shuffling Dawn a lot of the time, so being able to search just more of your pieces, get some extra consistency in, real strong there. Then we got the 3-cost Splitting from 08. Your turn once per turn. If a Dawn is returned to your Dawn deck, add 1 from your deck rested. This allows pretty much free leader ability once per turn. So that's really all it's for, obviously. Get the Dawn back if you want to, drop even bigger drops next turn. Or you can drop multiple bodies on the same turn. It helps, keep that Dawn up to be able to get those more impactful plays later on. Alrighty, so we got the 4-cost Bond Clay from EB1. This is just like the card to run in purple. On play, add an active Dawn, and then when it attacks, copy a character's base power of your opponent's. Real strong card. There's really nothing to really say about it other than that you have to run this card in some capacity in almost every single deck. And then we got the 4-cost Kamizo from 06. We run this card for a specific reason that'll show here in a second. Your turn once per turn. When you return it on, KO a 2-cost. So, when you use your leader ability, you can KO small little searchers against, decks like Rayleigh or, decks that run that activate main searcher like a Lafitte or a Bonnie or a Hiyori. You can also pop, chump blockers such as Koshiro, the 2-drop Rosinante, just really any little low body character that you don't want on the board. This can help, get rid of it while also getting advantage with your leader ability. And then we got the 4-cost Law from ST10. Blocker, Dawn -1 on play. If your opponent has 7 or more cards in hand, they trash 2 randomly. So this card you can play out for 2 Dawn in this deck, which is just super funny. This card is a very meme-worthy card. This card just kind of has everything that you want in a card for the most part. You're making opponent trash card from hand, and if you use leader ability, it's a real cheap card. So, real strong card there. And then we got the 2K Sanji from 07. If you have 2 or more fewer Dawn than your opponent, this card becomes a 3 cost to play and is a blocker. So this card is very, very strong. You know, if you've shuffled Dawn enough and you can't really get that Dawn value back, you can play this out for real cheap, and then it's really good there. Other than that, it's just a searchable 2K off of this law here. Next up, we got the purple 7 cost law from the new set. On play, if the number of Dawns is equal or less than your opponent, add 1 active, and then your Rosinante leader and all of your Heart Pirates characters plus 1k power until your next turn. This card's very good. You know, if you have, say you have this pudding on the board already, you're ramping by Dawn -1ing, which I think is real neat. And you know, you're also becoming a 6k leader until your next turn. You know, this card really is a huge defensive play while also, you know, having good offense. So that's really why we play this. I mean, this is meant for the deck for a reason. And, you know, playing it out for 5, you know, it comes up in a very good way. So then we got the 1-drop Rosinante. On play, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal a law, add it to hand. You're finding a law. I mean, there's really nothing else to say. You're searching your laws with this card. You know, find what you need, dandy. And then we got this promo law. I know this card's really expensive, so if you are trying to build this deck, prepare to spend a pretty penny. There is also a promo law from somewhere in Japan. I don't remember how you get it, but it's kind of crucial for this deck. It's a 4-cost 6k blocker. Then I think on play adds just Arrested Dawn if you're at equal or less. So it's a real strong card there. And, you know, English doesn't have it yet, and we don't know when we're going to get it. So for now, this deck is, you know, kind of bad without, you know, this card being super cheap or the law being, you know, in the game, period. But other than that, this card is very phenomenal. You know, it's just a searchable 2k. The trigger does not work, but it's just a 4-cost 5k, you know, beater that can come up in certain situations. So then we got the 6-cost law from OP12. Just a blocker. You know, good little fortress play. You know, on 6 Dawn, you can maybe drop like a double searcher, Dawn -1, and then play out this law. So you can play this out for 4 Dawn. It's really just a big little blocker at the end of the day. Then we got the 6-cost Kuma, the secret from OP12. This card's also very expensive, so, you know, this deck's just, it's pretty expensive for, you know, not for how rogue it is. But on play, trash a card, heal a card, and then it becomes an 8-cost to your next turn. And then if the card dies on your opponent's turn, you get to heal another. So this is a real cheap option. This compared off with this is a really nasty 10-Dawn combo. You know, you can heal for 6, use leader ability, play this for 4. And, you know, if you have this on the board, you're sitting good. You know, it's just a real strong play. You know, this deck definitely does take life pretty aggressively considering the other leader ability. So, you know, being able to heal and also block her up is really, really strong. And then we got the Supernova Law from OP10. Reveal a Supernova card from your hand and then place it to the top of your life face down, and then attach it onto your Supernova leader, but you're not. So this card heals quite a fair share of cards. It can heal this law, it can heal this law, and it can actually heal this Kamizo, which I thought was very, very interesting. So I definitely could see, you know, like a 3 captains kind of deck getting built one day. You know, being able to search like 5-cost Kid, you know, being able to add back an active Dawn when you use your leader effect. You know, I think it's just really cool stuff that could be built with this deck one day, but we're just gonna have to wait for now until that law comes out for us. That is going to be it for the characters, but so we got 2 of the Gatling, you know, just a 0-cost event. You know, we are playing a decent bit of bricks, so you want to be able to, you know, counter out, not have to worry about anything. And then we got a copy of Gamma Knife. This card can be searched off of the purple 1-drop law, so just helps, you know, get some good starving in, you know, -5k to a character. Real strong event there. But that is going to be it for the Rosie list. We're going to head into some games. Alrighty, y'all. So game one, going up against Blue Purple Sanji. If you haven't seen the last videos, watch that video. That video is very good with the gameplay. So starting off with their first turn pass, they use the Secret Searcher, add a card. You know, I'm just going to start with a 5k at lead. You know, more likely they're going to take here. They do. And then I'm just going to drop that 3-cost Law. You know, I'm going to shuffle and then be able to, you know, be able to search the next turn. They use another Secret Searcher, add a secret card, and they play the Beef Burst, bounce that Law to hand, and they use another Beef Burst with their leader ability, draw 2, and then a 5k at lead, take. So, you know, I don't really have a play here because I have to have it at least 6 Dawn to be able to play those 7 costs. So I'm just going to swing 7 and drop that Law again. You know, they're going to drop a Pudding, add a Beef Burst, Concaser to draw a card, Secret Search to add a secret card, leader ability, bounce that Law again. 3 of their Beef Bursts are already used. So that's really good. You know, they're not going to be able to refill their hand. They play out 1 Sanji and then swing a 5k lead. That's an easy counter there. I'm just going to pass. So I'm just going to start with a 5k lead. You know, get another card out of hand. They are at 2 life, so more than likely they're going to just counter. Then I'm going to drop that yellow Law, heal a purple Law. Passing the turn, they drop a Reiju blocker, use their 4th Beef Burst, which is crazy this early on, and then they play a 1-cost Law. I've seen that going around in lists, so they swing a 5k lead. I'm just going to take, and then a 6k to lead. I'm just going to 0-cost. Now, this turn is definitely the turn I drop the Kamzo. I'm at 9 Dawns, so I have 4 Dawn for that, and then I can play the 7-cost for 5, so that leaves the entire bit of Dawn used. And then a 1k boost for most of my board here. You know, I definitely want to try and challenge that Sanji. I want to force him to use a giant, but they end up using the King Kong Cobra or something like that. It's kind of just a blue rad beam. That's really all it is. If you have low cards in hand, it's a 4k. So they use a Secret Searcher, add a card, play a Pudding, add a Crash the Wedding Searcher. They play said Crash the Wedding Searcher, add a 3-drop Sanji. And they use the Broquette Blow minus the Law by 3k, so it's a 7k, and they Red Rock the other Law, so 7k onto that Law. I'm just gonna 1k, you know, I'm at 3 life, I don't really need that Guma right now. And then a 5k there, they messed up there. I have a purple Law in hand, so that is definitely what I'm expecting to play this turn. I definitely did a small misplay here, but, you know, I never would have, you know, thought of that. I never played this deck before, so I was thinking about using an active Dawn for it, but I'm just going to swing a 10k at the Sanji. Hopefully they let it die and not use like a giant or something, but they do use a giant, locking me out of my leader ability. Or actually the Law ability to add an active and boost my board, so that's fine. I still have a big body on the board. And then I'm just going to swing a double 7 at life. They take the first one and the second one. You know, if I was running that 2-cost unblockable Law event from set 12, it definitely would be over soon, but we don't. You know, I think the card is definitely costly for what it does. They add a Sanji and a Concaser, and then they bottom deck that Kuma, or they bottom deck the Kamazo with the Culverin, and then attach 3 to Pudding, swing a 5 at lead. I definitely should have took here, but, you know, we learn. And then I'm going to take the 6k and the 8k, another 7k. I'm going to 2k, 1k, kind of have to here. You know, I can drop a double blocker Law this turn, which is very, very strong, but that I definitely don't think that is the play. I definitely think I have enough board presence to kind of go for game here. You know, I have magic numbers here, 9k, force at least a giant, plus some other stuff out of hand. They have 4 Dawn up, so I really don't know what to expect with all the Dawn, but You know, they're kind of thinking about what to do with this. They do end up gianting, trashing a Sanji. Now I'm going to swing another 9 to lead. And then I'm just going to drop that Law and then swing a big 10k to lead. Use a King Cobra, and then that's it. You know, this matchup's very weird. You know, they can't really do anything about my 7 cost. You know, even if they play cards like Grab Blade or something, you know, they can't bottom them. The only card that can get rid of it is a Red Rock. But that's how this matchup goes. You know, very interesting game, but we're going to head on to the next one. Alright, so game 2 up against Red Blue Marco. You know, we have a pretty strong hand here. You know, got healing, got searching, kind of got it all. So I'm going to use a Rosie, add a blocker Law. And, you know, with Marco's, you know, general game plan, I think I have a pretty good matchup into him. Because of, you know, some Marco builds are a lot of KOing, removing. So I'm kind of able to keep that board presence going regardless of what they do. So I do whiff a Law Search, which just sucks, but we use a Rosinante, get a purple Law, swing a 6k onto lead, they take, and we just pass. You know, really nothing else to do there. I'm going to use that leader ability, draw 1, bottom deck 1, minus 2k to that Law. Just a big 8 to lead. I was taking it regardless of what swing they were doing, but hey, that's better. They have less Dawn, you know, do things with. So they just pass after that. You know, I really have nothing else to do with this Dawn, but I'm just going to probably drop that Kamazo. You know, they might drop, you know, with Marco, they have, you know, they're kind of the 2-cost spam E version kind of stuff going on, so the Kamazo could come up, you know, being able to pop a 2 almost every single turn, very strong, but they end up popping it with the Marco, and they swing a 6k lead. I will 2k out of that. You know, I really don't know what to do here. I definitely am expecting to just kind of drop one of the 7 drops. I don't know which one. I definitely think the purple one would be a lot better here. You know, I'm kind of thinking about what to do with this Dawn here. Yeah, it's definitely just swing a 7k here and play out one of those Laws. More than likely that yellow one, because I have no real reason to use extra Dawn after. So we do drop that yellow one, heal the promo Law, thinking it had a trigger, the trigger would work, but it doesn't. My leader's not Supernova, unfortunately, so that's fine. You know, we healed a card regardless at the end of the day. It's also a 2k. Heading on to Marco's 8 Dawn turn. Touch a Dawn to lead, use leader ability, draw 1 and top deck 1, minus 2 that Law. And they play that 5-drop Nami. If the leader's multicolored, draw 3, rearrange 2. The card is unbelievable. It's definitely a fair card. You know, people think the card was overwhelmingly broken, but I think the card's fine. And then I'm going to swing a 7k onto life. I'm just going to take. Not really too afraid of anything else. You know, I'm not going to swing at that marker next turn. I'm going to go hardcore on life, you know, get some cards out of hand. You know, even if I try to kill that Marco, they can just trash an event card to bring it back, which is just very, very annoying. So, heading on to, well, 8 Dawn turn, because I use leader ability. You know, this is kind of the turn where I drop that pudding, then I can use leader ability, get that Dawn back for free, and then I'm going to be able to drop that purple Law ramp and then boost my entire board, which is super duper strong. I'm going to swing a 7k onto lead. That is a 2k, 1k, 2 cards out of hand. Real nice on our end. And then a 10k lead. They block. You know, board is kind of scarce for the opponent. You know, we have decent counter in hand. We're sitting pretty good. We are definitely wide open for vulnerable swings, though. But we are 6k leader. You know, I'm definitely expecting a Sanji into Rayleigh. You know, that's just kind of what this deck is known for, to be able to Sanji into Rayleigh, which is just really strong play. but they just concede. You know, I definitely could, you know, yeah, they did not even have a 9-cost Sanji in hand, but I was definitely going to be able to, you know, get some bigger swings in. I was going to play that Kuma, probably. I was probably going to do this kind of Tendon combo here, but that is going to be it for the Marco game. You know, the anti-removal is kind of just rough against a deck like mine, but we're going to head into the next one against Blue Kuzan. Alrighty, y'all, so going up against Blue Kuzan, you know, hands kind of mid. Thinking of Mulligan. Not really much better, but we should be fine. You know, Bluezon is going first, which is bad on their end. So I'm going to use the Rosinante searcher, add a purple law, then a 5k lead. I'm just going to counter with that Bond Clay. I don't really see myself using it anytime soon. And then they drop that Sengoku. We'll be able to search 2 and draw 1 on top of it. They add that perfect combo there, plus an extra card, so very unfortunate there. Heading on to my Ford on turn. I'm just going to drop a 6k on the lead and then drop that pudding. You know, allowing me for, you know, to get pretty much free leader ability coming on the next turn here. So we have 5k at leader. I'm just going to take it. You know, I'm all the way up at 4 life still. It's 7k to lead, and then I just take, and they drop that 1-cost Rosinante, allowing, you know, anti-removal. So, you know, on the 6th on turn, I drop that Rosinante blocker. I'm going to add a hand rip law, and instead of playing the 7-cost law, I'm going to play the hand rip law. You know, I want to get hand size down for the opponent. I did not trash anything unbelievable there, but I'm just going to 5k at that Sengoku, get that card off the board. You know, you never know when they have a card that can bounce their own stuff. But I'm going to drop that 3-cost law and just pass the turn in hopes they don't have like a grab blade or something. But they drop that 7-cost Sokka, get some board presence, draw 2, attach it on to lead with Sokka's ability. I can 2k out. So I'm just going to swing a 7k lead. I keep forgetting that the law only says if your opponent has more, not equal or more. So that's fine though. I'm just gonna use leader ability, play that purple law, become 6k leader, 7k at lead. And they 2k, 1k, and then we're just gonna pass. You know, I obviously know what I'm kind of expecting this turn. In a Garp into a Sokka or Kuzan or something like that. Yep, they do Garp into Sokka, draw 2, refilter that hand. And swing a 7k onto that law, then an 8k onto that law. And then I can just use leader ability, you know, take that life card. And it, luckily enough, it was a healing law. So I'm going to be able to drop that next turn. So I'm just going to start with, you know, some magic number swings, thinking about my Dawn Disbursement here. Just going to start a 7k lead. There's no point in just swinging onto Kuzan's big bodies because they're just going to be drawing cards regardless of what they're doing or what you're doing. So there's no point in swinging into those bodies unless I have, you know, a similar board to theirs, which I obviously don't. So 7k at lead, they Pheasant Peck, go to 9k, draw a card. And then I'm just going to leader ability. I'm going to drop that Law for 5. Heal the Kamazo. And then swing 7k and 9k onto lead. They take that 7k and then 9k. They 2-2-1. And And then the unexpected card of my life hits the board in the 3-cost Hina, not allowing my blocker law to block for the turn, so that's just kind of unfortunate. I do have some counter, so I really don't know, but they have, you know, extra Dawn pretty much for free, so they're just gonna swing a not, you know, it's just kind of unfortunate, the fact that I can't block this in this situation, you know. Clip ended there, but, you know, Blues on is rough, you know. They're not KOing anything unless by battle, so my leader effect is practically useless, but it's unfortunate, but, you know, we move on. But we're going to head into the last game against Rob Lucci, which is an incredible matchup. Alrighty, so last game going up against Rob Lucci. This should be a pretty GG matchup, you know, anti-removal, very dumb. But we'll start off with that 1-cost law, add a yellow law. And they drop that in Man-Cherry, being able to get some trash recursion in. I have nothing to play, so I'm just going to swing double 5k on lead. They take the first one and then counter the second one. Going on to their 4-drop turn, I'm expecting something like a 4-drop Kuzan here. Or, you know, maybe a Laboon. 5k there, let it die. There's no point in keeping it. And they just drop a Lucci, vanilla Lucci. So, you know, real funny stuff there. I'm just going to play out that 6-cost law for 4. You know, I want... being able to play stuff for less cost is kind of huge. Especially early game because, you know, they don't have as much resources to use. So, 5k at lead. Just a free block. There at 6 Dawn. I really don't know what to expect here. The 6 Dawn turn for Lucci is typically pretty awkward, so it could definitely be a lot of removal or a lot of just general value plays. So they're gonna Rebecca add a Brook, just minus it, and they're gonna add another Rebecca off of the Man-Cherry. 7k lead, just take. I'm swinging 6k onto that Brook. You know, I kind of want that off the board. I don't want built-in removal on the opponent's side. So, good thing it dies. And then I swing a 7k, that Man-Cherry, it dies. Use the leader ability, play a 7-cost law, and heal the Kamazo. Going on to their 8-Dawn turn. This is where things get scary. You know, Rebecca, Hina, Lucci, the combo. But... I'm going to start with a 5k onto lead. I'm just going to 1k. You know, I don't need that Bond Clay at all whatsoever. I'm not really expecting anything huge on their side of the field. So they're going to try and remove my board here. They're going to Laboon. Then the Rebecca add a Brook, play Brook. And then that's where that leader ability comes up. Being able to, you know, just take a life card instead. Especially after healing. Feels really good. Swing a 6k onto that Brook. They 2k. You know, I want this Brook off the board as much as I can. So, I'm just going to swing a 7k at it. They block. Then a 9k at that Laboon. Don't want reduction either. They let that die, luckily for us. I'm going to drop that Law, heal a Kamazo once again. You know, that Brook's on the board. Hopefully they don't have multiple removal. If they do remove both cards at the same time, like with the 4-drop Lucci, I can just take 1 life card for both of those. Because it is in one specific sequence rather than, you know, 2 different instances. So that's what's really broken about this leader effect. So they 10-cost Kuzan. I get to add a life card. The 6k lead, I'm just going to take. I have Kumas in hand, so I'm going to be able to just add cards back to my life. But before we do that, I want to try and swing onto board. You know, that's what you got to do against Lucci. You just have to starve. So I'm just going to start with the 5 at that Brook. force a 2k out of hand, but it dies. And then a 9k onto that Lucci character. It dies. I'm just going to double block her up with the laws. I really don't know what else to do here. I mean, my Kuma is not really going to do much. The laws are not really going to do much. So it's better to just double play on the laws. Tempest Kick minus a law. Here comes the double removal play. I could just take 1 life card for it, which is broken. Beautiful. I love that. Good thing we have that Gamma Knife in hand, so I can just Gamma Knife into that Tenzon. So they're going to swing a 10k onto that 6-drop law. I'm just going to block. Then I'm going to minus 5k to that Kuzan there. I'm going to swing a 5-on-5 and then a 7-on-5. That is dead. And then they just scoop. There's not really... there's... all they have is just 2 blockers in a dream. They don't really have any cards they can see in these kind of situations. And I even have double healing cards, so... that's just how Rob Lucci goes. At least the matchup. Anti-removal is pretty good, I've heard. So that's going to do it for all the games today. We're going to end in that post-discussion. Alrighty, y'all. So Rosinante is a very, very interesting leader, to say the least. Anti-removal's kind of broken, and if he's one of your favorite characters, this deck is definitely for you. You're going to play out laws, you're going to protect your laws, you're going to be healing, you're going to be ramping. It's got a lot of, versatile plays you can do. But unfortunately, the leader is just not quite there yet. Until, the promo log gets a lot cheaper, the Kuma secret gets a lot cheaper, the Bond Clay comes out in PRB2, so we're going to have that soon. But for now, that card is expensive. And also that purple promo law. That card, we don't even know if it's going to come out for America. There is a couple cards in Japan that aren't even a thing in the West, so, we never know, but that is going to be it for Rosinante. Next up, last part of going over every OP12 leader, Blue Kuzan. That was definitely one of my favorite leaders of the set. Being able to just draw a bunch of cards is sick, but that is going to be it for the video. Hope y'all enjoyed. We are out of here.